back. I'm happy to report that the mountains are still beautiful. Actually, last weekend after we left a town called Pray, Montana, where it was a privilege for me to conduct a wedding of Lacey Robinson and Brad Farmeyer, we traveled through the beautiful Gallatin Canyon with the sparkling and glistening Gallatin River meandering through the canyon, named after Albert Gallatin, the U.S. Treasury Secretary at the time of the Lewis and Clark expedition. It is also a river where most of the fishing scenes from the movie A River Runs Through It were filmed. Some of you know a favorite movie of mine. So I could not leave this area with at least renting a fly rod and parking myself along the shore of a portion of the river just outside Big Sky, Montana. Now I can still throw a football down the field, but I'm no fisherman. Evidenced by the fact that I didn't get close to catching anything that beautiful sunny afternoon. But I did have fun practicing, the casting and pretending that I actually knew what I was really doing. But I say all of this because toward the end of my brief fishing adventure, a young man appeared with his girlfriend and started asking me questions about the difference between fly fishing and regular fishing in a lake. I thought to myself, he's asking the wrong guy on this one. But I did attempt to explain a few things. A friendly and likable guy from California, he then asked me if it would be okay if he launched his drone so it could fly up and down the river. He was concerned about scaring the fish, he said. I said, I don't think you have to worry about a drone scaring any fish. So the drone lifted off, down the river it went, and back the river it came. Then I thought to myself about the multifarious nature of this life in which we live. I had come to enjoy the river. I had come to the river to enjoy it for its fishing. He had come to enjoy the river for the path it would provide his drone. In a different way, it is true that the path to success and to fulfillment take on different shapes and forms. But the one constant is that the good usually doesn't happen until the negatives of life teach us their lessons. There are generally, as we know, no easy paths to achievement and meaning, and there are different seasons of life, as the writer in Ecclesiastes reminds us, filled with joy and satisfaction and restraint, difficulty, and grief. A time to tear down and a time to build, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn, and then there's a time to dance. There's a time to tear, there's a time to mend, there's a time to be silent, and there's a time to speak, are just some of the examples of the dualistic nature of life. And this dualism is particularly striking when one considers the path to good things in life is generally strewn with trails of setbacks and disappointments. Not too unlike what the late legendary golfer Bobby Jones called his sport of golf. He said, the closest game to the game we call life. You get bad breaks from good shots, you get good breaks from bad shots, but you have to play the ball where it lies. Now consider these people who, in an effort to make a difference, encountered hardship along the way. 18th and 19th century German composer Ludwig van Beethoven, after realizing that at the age of 30, he was going deaf, he considered taking his own life. That he didn't do it turned into immortality for the world of music. And bordering on the miraculous, Beethoven composed without any hearing at all the Ninth Symphony, the Solemn Mass, Missa Solemnis, and countless other works, and becoming a brilliant pianist. Never the good without the bad. The Polish electrician, dissident, and devout Catholic Lech Wałęsa was born and raised in a poor, very poor carpenter's family. Eventually went to work at the Lenin shipyard in Gdansk in the 1980s, and became appalled by the Soviet repression of workers, which led him to, as many of you remember, organize what was referred to as Solidarity, a workers' union growing to almost 10 million members overnight. Wałęsa was jailed by the Soviets, but after serving 11 months in prison, came back to lead Solidarity again, leading him to the Nobel Peace Prize and hastening the crumbling of communism. Never the good without the bad. Holocaust victim Anne Frank, during her hiding in the Netherlands from the Nazis from 1942 to 1944, kept a diary which was named the Diary of a Young Girl. Within it, pages and pages found hundreds of thousands of people found inspiration for their daily living from her very simple diary. And though she was later found by the Nazis and then sent to a concentration camp where she died of typhus, her father, the only survivor of the family, discovered the diary, and in it would be reflections such as how wonderful it is that nobody has to wait a single moment before starting to improve the world. And she said, think of all the beauty around you and be happy. And where there's hope, she said, there's life. It fills us with fresh courage and it makes us strong again. Anne Frank, in her darkest time, led others to hope and optimism. Never the good without the bad. Economist magazine just last week recently reported on the passing of Irina Watyszynska, a dissident and poet of the Soviet era. As a child, she read the legendary Russian Christian writers Dostoevsky and Tolstoy, along with Chekhov and Pushkin. Having been commanded by the government to be an atheist, she was naturally the reverse, said the magazine, because with faith, she said, her soul can never be manipulated. In 1983, she was sentenced to a labor camp for 7 years and internal exile for 5 years, branded as a dangerous criminal. There she endured regular beatings and freezing cold in isolation cells. But after her release, she would leave the country and then she would return. And later she would say that all the horrors of her imprisonment nourished her poetry. The most vivid dreams she ever had, Irina said, came to her in her isolation cell. Never the good without the bad. The Apostle Paul began his ministry literally blinded by the revelation of Christ, and initially disoriented and devastated, he went on to become, as we know, the greatest evangelist in the Christian faith. But not until he was tortured, imprisoned, at times going for days without food, betrayed by his closest friends, shipwrecks and setbacks, and then beheaded in the end. But these letters, as we know in the New Testament, have been read by hundreds of millions over the centuries, have become one of the greatest anchors for our Christian faith. And Jesus, as we heard this morning from Taylor in his prediction of Peter's betrayal, understood the nature of disloyalty and desertion, and the fact that when people are backed into a corner, they will do things that even they themselves didn't think they would ever do. Peter is one of them. The most trusted of the apostles turned out to be the most terrified. But his terror later turned into courage as Peter himself turned tables and became one of the anchors of our faith. Never the good without the bad. Jesus himself, we know, was treated poorly and ruthlessly, especially in his final days. His road to the cross was about as brutal as it comes. His message offended many, inspired others, just as taking the lower seat at the banquet read by Taylor this morning. He who will be humbled will be exalted. So much inspiration that Jesus delivered to a few, that their enthusiasm for the Christian faith spread so rapidly after the resurrection that it would eventually become the official religion of the Roman Empire. Never the good without the bad. Many of you have stories of unwanted and difficult things that have happened along your life's journey that consequently have made you a stronger, more confident, and more faithful person. You didn't ask for the bad, but because you endured it and you learned from it, you became a better person. You know, grief can produce grace. Sorrow can produce sympathy. Rejection can produce reflection. Failure can produce faith. In the season of commencement speakers in May and June, I especially took note of Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts' address to his son's middle school graduation. And part of his remarks to these young people included these words: "From time to time, I hope you will be treated unfairly so that you will come to know the value of justice. I hope you will suffer betrayal that will teach you the importance of loyalty. Sorry to say, but I hope you will be lonely from time to time so that you don't take your friends for granted. I wish you bad luck again from time to time so that you'll be conscious of the role of chance in life and understand that your success is not completely deserved and that the failures of others are not completely deserved either. And when you lose, as you will from time to time, I hope every now and then your opponent will gloat over your failure. It's a way to understand the importance of sportsmanship. I hope you will be ignored so you understand the importance of listening to others. And I hope you will have just enough pain to learn compassion. Now, whether I wish these things or not, they're going to happen. And whether you benefit from them or not depends on your ability to see the message in your misfortune. Every single one of the people mentioned before were treated unfairly, were betrayed, were lonely, were ignored, and failed at some point or another in their life. But they saw the message in their misfortune. It is a lesson for the ages. It is a lesson for you and me. It is a lesson upon which the Christian faith was founded.